Well, yes, today is a momentous occasion where we have to reveal our presence. Our royal figure has to show up on our video because something happened in the last 24 hours. Our dear leader, Ion Azekostas, the lead game designer of WoW, came up with a big compilation post trying to make things more clear around the incoming genocide of Addons. He was pointing out that in the past few months, really, there has been a ton of communication fragmented between videos, blogs, posts, interviews, conversations left and right. It's a bit hard to just pick them all back up together. So we're gonna come up with another post trying to condense all of these news and all of the philosophy behind what's going to happen in Midnight in a single post. And then he also followed it up with an extra post in the WoW UI dev Discord, so for the Addon developers to be even clearer around what's happening. So we have already, of course, covered this major happening in Midnight a few times already in the type of changes that will come to our UI. However, in this latest set of communication, there has been something being said that is quite worrying. Honestly, it feels like I'm going insane because of these things being pointed out and how it sounds, really, how it looks, which is this thing right here. So Ion is pointing out that the way they rolled out this add-on disarmament in Midnight is that when we started thinking about the concerns on the impact of add-ons in combat, we were starting to evaluate the feasibility of a solution, as well as the right time frame. So what do we do to the add-ons and when? When do we roll this out? However, what they also wanted to do is gauge community sentiment around the general issue. Ion is saying WoW's history is littered with examples of the dev team trying to solve perceived problems that most players weren't particularly concerned about, and we wanted to reassure ourselves that we weren't headed down the same path. You wonder, why would WoW's history be littered with these examples? If these are always wrong, shouldn't have you learned not to do this a while ago? But whatever. Now, the first danger sign is when he says, we were happy to see a lot of positive reactions to the discussions. And then says, I'm not going to pretend that there was unanimous support, but the average take was something along the lines of, it would be great if add-ons weren't required, but I'm not sure I trust Blizzard to pull it off, right? So this is already, I'm not sure we can let Ion pass with this statement. I don't think there has been a lot of positive reactions to the discussion of destroying combat add-ons in Midnight. Because I think that even the example he's making, oh, it would be good if add-ons weren't as intrusive in combat, but I have zero faith Blizzard can pull it off. I wouldn't even call that positive. That's not too positive of a statement to make, right? But it is true. There is a disheartening amount of casuals like the following that have this opinion. There is a group of people that believe that the reason why Mythic Raiders and high-level Mythic Plus players exist is because they are carried by add-ons, and they, the casuals, are honest MMORPG enjoyers that don't want to filthy themselves with add-ons. They could be top-level players, but they don't want add-ons to play for them, right? So they don't use them. So now that Blizzard announces the add-on dying, they are very happy because it's going to expose all of these players who have gotten carried by add-ons in the Race to World First or in a Mythic Plus title, right? There is a unfortunate large size of players with this mentality. However, I still don't think it was that large, that big of a community to make Blizzard actually believe that there were a lot of positive reactions to the idea of killing Weakauras, Plater, and similar other very loved add-ons throughout these years in WoW. Now, this is not the worrying part though. The worrying part is this one. So Blizzard says, okay, convinced that we are on the right track because we were thinking about getting rid of the add-ons and we just got the positive reinforcement of our players. So, okay, we have the go-ahead from our players. What do we do now? We shifted to building a roadmap of what it would take to pull off this transformation. So let's start thinking about when do we kill them off? We have established the community has our back. We have also established the best way to deal with this is to kill them off, to kill the addons off. So when do we roll this out? Ian says the team found that progress on the UI engineering front was moving faster than expected, both in the terms of the secret values system, so how do we hide the code in our API so the addons can't go and pick them up, and in terms of implementing the replacements, right? Implementing our own nameplates, our own cooldown manager, etc., etc. That made a readiness for the launch of Midnight a real possibility. That is what made this ready for Midnight. What is doubled up on this statement is what follows. These changes must have to be made on an expansion boundary, allowing us to build a full slate of content and system meant for the post-disarmament, post-addon disarmament world. Trying to ask players to relearn content mid-expansion they have been playing with addons, now suddenly without addons, would have been a recipe for unhappiness. So these two things together give us the 100% guaranteed, confirmed statement that this entire plan was for the last Titan, or the next expansion. Because as Ian says, we cannot launch this big of a system mid-expansion. So it would have had to be on expansion release. But then he also says, because we were going faster than expected in developing, this made us ready for the launch in Midnight. Which meant the plan was to launch it in the last Titan. You were faster than expected, so you dragged it back to Midnight. But that's a 2-year gap. How much faster were you going in developing this UI, I guess, replacement for the addons that you, in the span of a few weeks, because remember, up until like April of this year, they were not planning on releasing this in Midnight. In the span of a few months, you think you can cut the release by 2 years, from the last Titan release to Midnight release. That's the really worrying part, because that's also what we talked about when this was first announced, what we expected was going to happen. Even from the tone of voice of Ian, pointing out, don't worry, we are not killing off Weakauras. It's going to be a slow and gradual procedure that we will follow closely over time with the addon developers to make sure everything goes smoothly, the transition goes smoothly over time. Don't expect this to be out right immediately in Midnight. It's going to be a long process. So back then, the idea was Midnight launches and we get the newly updated, upgraded cooldown manager, while you still can use Weakauras. And then 12.1 launches and we get party and raid frames, while you can still use Cell, Voodoo, Grid, and whatever. 12.1.5 launches and now we have the nameplates added in the default UI, while you can still use Plater. And then 12.2 launches and you can still use DBM and bigwigs, but now you have the in-game boss mods. And then you have the pre-patch on the last Titan, which is when those addons will be disabled, and now you will fully move over to the in-game UI. And that was preceded by almost 2 years worth of improvements, additions, tinkering, listening to feedback of the community, of everyone who tested those introductions in the game, in the default UI over the course of the entirety of Midnight. Constant debates and conversations with the addon developers to try to figure out better solutions for the Blizzard's UI over the course of Midnight, so that by the time the last Titan launches, you have what we have now. So all of the addons disabled and only the Blizzard UI. But that had 2 years worth of testing, essentially. So it's really worrying that they thought just in a few weeks, they thought that just because the progress on the UI engineering front was moving faster and the implementing of the replacements of our UI was moving faster, we decided to shorten the release from the last Titan February 2028 to Midnight February 2026. And this is, we even get the confirmation that it's rushed when they say concentrating our efforts on making the highest impact changes first. Why? Because we acknowledge that we are not going to have time to address all pain points you have been pointing out before pre-patch. Because it wasn't planned to come out in midnight, it was planned to come out 2 years later, right? And that is obviously visible even in game. They say they're going faster than expected, but most of this looks horrible. Your ability to edit this is amatorial at best. This has nothing to do with the idea of, oh, we have to get rid of Weakauras and Plater because they play the game for you. This is about having these bars, and this is all you can edit. You can't even change the padding down to 0. You can't even change the size of the icon to be as large as the size of the bar because they move together. You can't even make a dynamic group where they get created one after the other. If I, for example, were to use Unstable Affliction and Malevolence at the same time, they would show up here and here, creating an insufferable gap in the middle, And not to mention the replacement for the replacement for nameplates right now is absolutely horrendous. You have zero way of editing any of this. The order of the debuffs, the dots, or the buffs on enemies, the filter, not wanting to see specific dots in here. Good, for example, for a warlock who can get, for example, permanent, endless, infinite corruption that you don't want to see on enemies because it's going to be there all the time. You can't filter it. It can't go away. There is no option for filtering, and I don't even want to trigger healers too much when talking about party and raid frames in terms of filtering. Right now, good luck trying to play as a Resto Druid with a list of 6 different HOTS, all one after the other at the bottom. It's awful at the moment. So where did they get the idea that they were progressing so much faster in their development of these features that it was warranted releasing this big change in the game? As far as I can remember, the biggest change we've ever had in WoW, to basically 2 years faster. And Ion is also addressing this. He's saying, in the end, when he had to make this decision of when to release this add-on disarmament, in the end, we were faced with the decision of either signing up for a couple more years of designing our content around powerful add-ons in ways that make it impossible for us to serve our whole community. This is gaslighting. This means nothing. Designing our content in ways that make it impossible for us to serve our whole community. What does that mean? Just because you had add-ons in combat, you weren't able to serve your whole community? Or moving forward now, this instant, and finding solutions within this new paradigm. So they address this. They know it's weird. They know it's off that they are pushing these changes essentially 2 years in advance compared to when it was initially planned. And this is, the main worry now. Because even if in like the example of Ion and the positive reaction they got from the community from this, even those positive players, even the ones who are happy that add-ons are dying because they thought it was the only thing blocking them from joining Liquid, even them would be saying, okay, sure, but I don't think Blizzard will be able to make this. I don't trust Blizzard to be able to pull this off. And that is pattern recognition. Remember, this was already back in Dragonflight. What was Blizzard saying about the big problem of healers and one-shots and this constantly growing problem in Mythic Plus, where the only difficult thing eventually becomes the mechanics hurt so much that you either perfectly interrupt all the mobs or you die from a one-shot. And Blizzard was saying, the only way to threaten players' lives is by damaging them even faster, so that you create a situation where healers have to react and players have to preemptively start using defensives or external cooldowns in order to survive. That's something we are keeping a very close eye on over the course of the beta of Dragonflight, because we don't want this to happen again. What happened? The exact same thing. And then this discussion repeated at the beginning of the War Within. What did we do? We increased the player's health. by 10%, by 20%, by 30%. Why? So that your health pool is larger, which means it takes you longer for you to get one shot, which means you have more time to react to the damage you're taking. What happens in the War Within? Players get one shot. Healers have no time to react. Most of the staying alive issues in Mythic Plus keys now end up becoming defensives and externals again, and healers do nothing. So this is another example of Blizzard wanting to fix something, wanting to fix a problem in the game, which has been going on for now several expansions and they have been unable to fix. So what would give us the trust in Blizzard that they are able to fix this? Especially because Blizzard, even though they have constantly in the past 2 expansions now attacked Weakauras in particular as what was stopping them from developing bosses. I'm pretty sure at this point Fractillus, this expansion, was a psyop. It was intentionally made horrible just so Blizzard could constantly refer to Fractillus as an example of, you know, Weakauras solving the boss for you, even though it's your fault for having designed such a trash boss. And the best thing of this is that over the course of this time, Blizzard did nothing to simplify, Blizzard did nothing to help us solve mechanics, When do we get mechanics divided by color, for example? Instead of requiring Weakauras to tell us where to go, what if we made the 4 debuffs landing on 4 players, and instead of being dark blue circles on a dark blue ground, what if one of those circles was green, another one was red, another one was blue, and another one was yellow? Wouldn't have it been much simpler for the mechanic to be able to orientate and communicate who goes where based on the color of your debuff? That's something you could have put in-game even in the Burning Crusade. You had the technology to design different colors on debuffs since 15 years ago, and it has never happened. So the idea that now, all of a sudden, in 3 months, less than 3 months worth, 3 months of the beta, we'll be able to not only fix all of the UI, in particular raid frames, party frames, cooldown manager, nameplates, to be somewhat half decent, plus design mechanics in Mythic Plus and in the raid to accommodate for the lack of the info we can get from Addons, plus redesign, let's not forget, redesign the 40-something specs to be simplified and pruned deeply since the War Within, right? Many specs and classes losing a ton of stuff. Again, because of this. This is also part of the Addon disarmament. Blizzard pointed it out that it isn't just about you having more time to react to mechanics because the mechanics are now slower. Then we can also simplify your rotation. That's also what they said. We can smoothen out the specs, make them have less decisions required, less tracking of buffs, of stacks, less computational management to do in your brain on your rotation. So they also have to simplify the specs. All of this coming at once in the midnight release is what is worrying players. It isn't even just the idea of the addons being removed themselves, is all of this coming in at once. And I thought it was an insane decision reading or hearing from Blizzard that they are indeed self-aware about this. So they knew they wanted this out in Last Titan. They knew they wanted 2 years worth of slowly working out to ditch the addons as you improve your base UI over the course of midnight before getting the full product in the Last Titan. But because for some reason apparently the devs were faster developing this secret values to kill off the addons plus developing the replacements in the base UI, then you just cut your timeline by 2 years. That's insane. That cannot have been thought out properly. That's my main thing. There's no way you were out giving out interviews in March and April saying this was coming out in the Last Titan, but not saying directly, but saying don't expect this out in midnight, it's going to be a slow process, etc., etc. And then by July, August, you were already pointing out how this was coming out in midnight. There is no way this is being thought out properly, and that you actually have the time to make this come out properly at the release of midnight. And so at this point, it's not even about hopium or copium, because we have the confirmation already. This wasn't planned to come out in midnight. It has been rushed by 2 years, and it will not be finished on launch. Blizzard is even confirming that it won't be finished on launch. There will be things left behind. So we will have to go maybe getting it done by 12.2, 12.2.5, some year after the release of midnight, but definitely not on release. That's what is leaving us a bit confused, which is funny. Ian made this mega comprehensive post to give more clarity to the situation, but these couple of statements have made everything just worse, look worse for this decision of Blizzard. But with this done, that's all we have for today on this Friday, after this very hard to understand set of decision making from Blizzard for this new expansion. Now, I'm gonna take you away from this depression, because it's Friday, it's the beginning of the weekend, so you go and do whatever. It's definitely gonna be more happy and funny than having to listen through all of this. So we're starting our goodbyes as usual by thanking everyone for having watched the video, together with, of course, everyone else who has been supporting completely for free by liking and commenting down below, as well as subscribing to the channel itself. Now, with these things out of the way, thank you guys again for watching. See you guys tomorrow, and in the meantime, it feels like I'm crazy. How is this real? Why?